được trân trọng giới thiệu và kính mời lên sân khấu ông Michael Han, Phó Chủ tịch Hiệp hội Doanh nghiệp Hàn Quốc tại Việt Nam với phần trình bày chủ đề tích hợp đổi mới sáng tạo và ESG, chiến lược tăng trưởng bền vững cho doanh nghiệp Việt Nam. Trân trọng kính mời ông.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this very special event. My name is Michael Han, and I'm currently serving as one of the vice chairmen of Korea Chamber of Commerce here in Vietnam. In the meantime, I'm also the chief representative of SK Group of South Korea. During the next 10-15 minutes, I will try to explain how green transition matters now more than ever, and we will explore how the Korean government and enterprises have navigated this through before closing with how Vietnam can learn from what the Koreans have. But before we jump into the slides, let's just take a step back. The recent history and try to understand how all this green transition and ESG movement has started. Over the last couple of decades or so, the consumers of most developed countries in North America and also in Europe have become a bit more vocal than ever before. So what that means is that, especially amongst the younger generations, regardless of where their social values stand, the consumers began to use their purchasing power as a leverage tool to support or sometimes boycott those enterprises that support their set of values. And triggered by these drastic change of consumer behavior and growing self-awareness of the producers themselves, they must become more socially responsible. The enterprises have started to voluntarily accept these roles that the society demanded and started to undertake more proactive roles, especially on protecting the environment. And with all these series of developments have become a de facto social contract, and for any enterprises wanting to play a role in the global market, it was expected that these companies follow and adhere to these strict standards. But during the last decades or so, these enterprises are now requiring their global suppliers, regardless of where they are, also to follow the same ESG standards. So in order to be successful in the global market, not only you have to win the hearts of your customers with your products that you produced, you also have to get their support on how these products are produced. So with that in background, let's take a quick look at these, the four squares that have here on the slides I have prepared for today. First will be the higher standards of carbon emissions and environmental matters. And with the summers of the world getting hotter and hotter, I can almost promise you that these standards will continue to go up, not down. Second will be the EU carbon border adjustment mechanism, the same issue that Cyril just spoke about. After a few years of a trial transition period, it is now in full application as of 2026. And third, as I earlier mentioned, there will be inevitable pressure coming as the global brands will require that all of their suppliers, regardless of the location, follow the same strict ESG standards that they themselves follow. So for those Vietnamese enterprises that are keen to enter the global market, the same standards must be managed if they are to export, seek investment from overseas, and even enter as a supply chain player. So on this slide, let's take a quick look on what Korea have been doing. Korea is aiming 2050 as a carbon neutral country, and by 2030, reduction of 40% is also targeted using 2018 as the reference point. Korea has roughly slightly over half of Vietnam's population, so much smaller domestic market than Vietnam, but its economy is 3 times larger than that of Vietnam. And there will be a number of factors why this is the case, but the biggest one is that Korea has been a major global exporter and manufacturer compared to Vietnam. After the devastation of the Korean War back in 1953, the leaders of Korea had designed such that Korea would seek for economical growth as an export-focused, manufacturing-based country. And what we talked about in the earlier slide, if you want to go global, you have to commit to the green transition. And as a result, whether Korea liked it or not, Korea had to adopt early to the ESG standards and force the green transition. And how did Korea adopt? We'll talk about that further on the next page, but Korea found out that if the Korean government asked the Korean enterprises to change on a purely voluntarily basis, that we could never achieve these goals. Instead, the Korean government introduced regulation at a proper timing and later on created financing incentive as well as penalty, and that changed the whole industry, providing even greater motivation for the enterprises to adopt. So to continue on from our previous slide, let's find out a bit more about Korea's execution plan addressing the ESG challenges. In dealing with Korean enterprises in the past over many different issues, the Korean government concluded that it cannot completely rely on Korean enterprises to voluntarily make these necessary changes for the green transition. The government decided that it has to take much more direct approach by setting up the system, which then would be measured, monitored, and lastly governed by these new institutions, which in aggregate provided the Korean enterprises with both positive and negative reinforcements to adopt to the green transition. To give you a few examples, the KETS is an institution which prices corporate carbon emissions to facilitate the trading, while the EPR extended the producer's responsibility on disposing of the products in an environmentally safe manner. Lots of small to medium enterprises has to be trained so that they would have to get the information needed to adopt across the entire supply chain, while the K taxonomy defined what is deemed as a green investment and provided tax deductions and incentives. And lastly, the green finance supports, encourages, and incentivizes eco-friendly investments. All these efforts were absolutely needed to expedite the green transition in Korea. So on this slide, we'll take a quick look on how Korea implemented the green circular economy. The core objective is to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, meaning that we got to minimize the waste as much as possible, and whatever is left, try to bring that back as a resource into the production cycle again as much as possible. First, the extended producer responsibility, or the EPR, is very strongly followed in Korea, as Korean producers must create an ecosystem to maximize the chances of their product, especially on the packaging component, being recycled after the product life. The old days where the producers are no longer responsible after the product has been sold will not be coming back. And the Korea's Basic Framework Act on Resource Circulation provides a broad platform to prevent wastage by promoting long usage and inapplicable reusage, then recycle what is left and recover any energies on applicable cases, and finally disposing the product in the most environmentally friendly manner. And of course, one of Korea's biggest environmental challenge arises from the food waste. For those any Korean food lovers out here, guess where all those little banchan dishes go as soon as you leave the restaurant? They go right into the wastage. And this created a massive problem on keeping the environmental friendly in the Korean economy. And lastly, a huge incentives are given, and sometimes penalties are imposed, depending on how eco-friendly a new building is, with the objective of minimizing the energy waste. In the meantime, Vietnam has also set a very challenging goal, but because of the similarities in culture between Vietnam and Korea, perhaps Vietnam's journey can be an easier one if the Korea's experiences and all those know-hows can be used as a reference to minimize the efficiencies of learning through trial and error. This is especially important when considering Vietnam's strong desire to become a new global manufacturing hub, as mentioned in the earlier slides. ESG compliance would be the only option Vietnam can consider. I won't go into the details as we already spoke about them, but all the institutions and systems that Korea has set up already, Vietnam can definitely consider benchmarking them. So even with all these cooperations, it is not an easy challenge. It's a huge task for Vietnam. Of course, the first thing is to seek for solutions for substantial initial cost of investment cost. That being said, there are global development banks and institutions out there that can actually assist on this matter, and perhaps Korea's experience can be relied upon as a guidance of help. Secondly, the finding people who have done this is another critical challenge, but here is how Korea can assist by sending our experts into Vietnam for training sessions and providing the download on all the know-hows that had been accumulated in Korea. But all in all, there has been so much cooperation that have been taking place between Vietnam and Korea, and with KOCHAM's assistance, I am confident that a productive, mutually beneficial partnership on green transition can be successfully achieved. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Given the limited time, if you have any questions, please email to myself and our team at info@kochamvietnam.com. That's info@kochamvietnam.com. We'll be happy to assist. Thank you very much.